How's it going, and welcome to my Roll20 Masterclass. In this series, we're going to be looking at how to make Roll20 work. It is a really awesome tool to use purely because it's free. And because it's free, it's just easily accessible. The other thing to consider is that in addition to this being free, it is not hardware intensive. The more simple PCs can definitely run this, although older PCs and older laptops might have a little bit of a harder time. But with that being said, during these terrible times, sometimes you want to play online, and Roll20 is just a simple way to do it. In addition to Roll20 giving you the access of freedom, but because it's free, you can also pay into it, and it lets you add extra features such as dynamic lighting, such as importing bigger size maps and all that, and also the fact that you could just buy modules online instead of buying the books. And this is really useful because if you buy the modules on Roll20 and start a game with it, then instead of having to do a ton of prep work in regards of making tokens, making maps, making this, making that, all that stuff is taken care of. All you have to do is add whatever you are going to add extra to the module. And that is, I promise you, going to save hundreds of hours of prep time over the course of however many sessions you run or however many modules you play in. I am by no means an expert, but I do have a few hours played in Roll20, so I can speak from a little bit of experience. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. First things first, we have to create a game. So where do you do that? Once you hop on Roll20, you're probably going to see something like this, after you've signed in, of course. You will see your games, which presumably if this is your first time, you're going to have none. But if you are new to DMing and want to learn this, then you'll probably have seen this before. You can see here, you can join a game, create a new game, all that stuff. But I personally don't like this little map. What I like to do is I like to click on home because that gives me a better look at the games that I'm currently running or the games that I'm playing in. As you can see here, I'm playing and or DMing in a few here. But what we're going to be doing here is creating a new game. So as simple as that, we're going to go ahead and click Create New Game. This is going to take us to a prompt where all we have to do to create a game is start a new game by creating a name for it, possibly giving a tag for it, and you could just as simply click I'm ready. In addition to that, you can also click on one of the many modules you own, and it will already import all of those assets into the game that you're playing. For the instance of this specific class, we're not going to be choosing module, just so I can walk you through some more basics on how to create tokens and all that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and make our game. So we are choosing to name this game Roll20 Masterclass, but the thing is if I click it, then as soon as we create the game, then it's just going to be a blank space. The great thing about Roll20 is that there are hundreds of role-playing games baked into this system. So what we need to do now is hop over to optional, choose a character sheet. And once you click on this, we can see here that there is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of options. So I'm willing to bet that if you're playing a role-playing game, the one that's actually, popular, I'm gonna bet it's here. For, of course, simplicity's sake, we're going to go ahead and choose D&D 5th edition Roll20. Pretty simple stuff, and it's going to give us a nice little character sheet. Once we have the name and the character sheet we desire, all we do is click I'm ready. Now that we have created our game, we are now prompted here where it shows us our game, when we can see that we have content options, we have looking for players options, we have settings options, and we can also even choose a little banner here. Let's go ahead and pick a fun banner for this, why not? As soon as you click choose a file, you can go ahead and find something interesting that you want to put in here. Ah, perfect, my favorite module. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive right into creating the game. You needn't worry about clicking all that content and setting stuff until you really decide how you want to run these games. So let's go ahead and launch that game. Alrighty, now that we're logged in here, we can see that we are in our own little blank space. So the first thing I would strongly recommend you do once you have now created your game is to customize your game. And how you do that is in the top right corner here, you're going to have a whole bunch of options. The one that we're going to be looking at is the cog because that is where all the personal settings are. So once we click on my settings, we get several prompts. You can change your display name. You can change the volume of the game. You can enable background chat beep. You can enable chat avatars. You can enable animated graphics, etc., etc. So play around with these and find what's right for you, because if you leave the settings as is, you're going to have your name, which whatever you signed up for Roll20 with is going to be your typical display name. So go ahead and change that as you desire. Maybe make it the character that you're playing as. Maybe go ahead and write Game Master or Dungeon Master, or maybe just say no fun allowed. In addition to that, you'll see here that enable background chat beep. What that means is if you are looking somewhere else and someone rolls some dice, Roll20 is going to have an audible beep over to the side, and that'll probably grab your attention. I personally don't like it because I don't like loud noises, so I typically turn that off, but that's entirely your preference. Next up here, you may want to change up is the player avatar size and location. So as you can see here, it is currently regular, and we can change it up. You could make it large and it gets huge. You can make it small and it gets smaller. And my personal favorite, names only. If you choose names only, then it takes up a lot less space and you can focus your attention on a lot more things. That's what I find anyway. But once again, if you are doing a role-playing game and you want to have your avatar up to truly always remind who is who, then that is perfectly acceptable. Another thing to consider is where the location is. We currently only have two options, top and bottom. And as you can see here, it just goes top to bottom. Once again, entirely your preference. And the last thing we want to change up here is as soon as you join any Roll20 game, you're always going to be prompted to broadcast and receive video and voice from others. Meaning that if you have a webcam plugged in, it's automatically going to try and connect to your webcam. And if you have a mic plugged in, it's going to try and connect to your webcam. You can use Roll20 for both video and voice output, but you don't have to. You could be using any other supplement such as Discord or TeamSpeak or whatever else anybody's using these days. So if you are using it somewhere else, then I would just go ahead and click on these buttons and disable whatever you don't need. I personally run my games through Discord, so I would go ahead and disable the broadcast for both of these. These effects do not take place until you refresh this page, however. So if you connect it to your video and voice and you just go ahead and click that button, but you're still playing, then obviously some people may be able to still hear you. So now that we got all those boring technical stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into what makes Roll20 great. It's the fact that, once again, it's free, and you can import whatever you want in here. It's fantastic. So I'm getting a little bored staring at this little white screen here. Let's go ahead and add a map that I've created. So how do we put a map that we've created onto Roll20? Well, it's just as simple as opening up your documents, clicking and dragging whatever map you want to throw on there, and putting it on the page. Once you do this, we'll be prompted with this uploading, and it may take a few minutes depending on your connection, of course. But once it's there, it explodes. Like that. So here we are, we've thrown together a really terrible map and put it onto Roll20. Now what do? We see here that we're allowed to manipulate it and move it around. However, mind you that you in particular are the only person that's able to manipulate this map. Later on, we will be going into detail on how you can give your players access to certain things, but for right now, we're going over the basics. So we currently have this map. The only issue is when I created this map, I created it as a 25 by 28 square grid. Something that astute people might find is that whenever a map is created in Roll20, it's typically a 25 by 25. So how do we fix that? Well, all we simply need to do is go ahead and click on the page toolbar and now click on the individual page settings. Here we'll be able to see a wide variety of things, and we can see here that it automatically defaulted as a 25 by 25 grid. I want to make this a 25 by 28 grid. So all we simply need to do here is go ahead and bump it up to our desires. And go ahead and make it 25 by 28. Once we've corrected all of our measurements, we simply click OK, and it will set. Now, how do we make this map adjust to our new dimensions? Well, we have several options. One, you could simply go ahead and drag it over to the corner, and you can go ahead and click on the corner and drag it out completely. And look at that. It fits beautifully. Another thing you can do if you are an advanced user of Roll20, you can go ahead and right click on whatever object you're looking at and go ahead and scroll over And we can see here that we can set the dimensions. Once we click on this, we are prompted to choose how many pixels it has. However, it's way simpler to go ahead and click on the units. And we can see here that it defaulted to 17 by 19. So we're going to go ahead and change that to 25 by 28. And once we set it, it is just like that. And all we need to do is simply drag it to wherever we want. And just like that, our map is set. So once again, astute people are going to be noticing that we put our map down, but our grid disappeared. Why is that? Well, currently, this map is not on a map layer. This map is on the token layer, which is essentially the very top layer of all of our actions here. So we want to show the grid on this map, and also we want to maybe even further adjust the grid. So how do we do this? All we simply need to do is go ahead and right click on this object and hover over the layer button. And we can see here we have three options: the map layer, the token layer, and the GM layer. All you need to do is go ahead and click on the map layer, and just like that, our grids are put down on top of it. Fantastic. But this grid might not be suitable for your needs. Maybe you don't like the fact that each square is 5 feet. Maybe you want to adjust it so that diagonals are in fact more feet, because that is in fact how you're supposed to balance 5e. Maybe you want to make the grid more poppy and thus make a different color. Once again, we can go ahead and go over to the page settings and we can adjust all of this. So we can see here that the page scale is currently 1 grid cell equals 5 feet. We can adjust that numerical number. We can say that each square is 10 feet should we desire. And also we can change the measurement. We can make it miles, kilometers, millimeters, inches, centimeters, UN. I don't even know what that is. We can make it hexes and squares, and we can make it custom. So depending on what game you're running and what map you're trying to go for, you can adjust this thing completely. And that is fantastic. In addition, we don't have to work with just squares. We can also work with hexes. We can use vertical hexes, which you can see here. And we can also work with horizontal hexes. So once again, you know, if you are running a hex crawler, then you can go ahead and do that. But if you are running just a traditional combatant, then you can go ahead and use the squares. In addition, you can also change how it is measured, as I stated before. So it's currently listed as D&D 5th edition, 4th edition compatible. But let's go ahead and change it over to Euclidean and see what that does. If you're wondering how I measure things, on the far left here we have this toolbar, and all you simply need to do is go ahead and click on the circle with the ruler running through it. So before we saw this looks like 10 feet. However, if I adjust it over here, then we can see that, ooh, now we're getting into some weird numbers because we're on Euclidean. I personally wouldn't recommend Euclidean for most games because using imperfect numbers is a little bit odd. So what I would recommend is using Pathfinder / 3.5th edition compatible. And what that does is, as we can see here, this is normally 10 feet, but now every other square diagonal is 15 feet. I like that because, you know, once again, that is 30 feet and that is 20 feet. If you don't have diagonal set as extra, then you are going to have some weird wonky movement where diagonal moving is actually faster than forward moving, which is a little bit odd. And lastly, like I said, maybe you want that grid to pop a little more. Currently it's set to gray. Let's go ahead and make it a vibrant red. And look at that, now we can begin to see it just a little bit differently. It stands out a lot more, and you can do a lot of artistic vision with it. But in addition, maybe you want it to stand out a lot more. Let's go ahead and bring that opacity up all the way, and look at that. You can't not see the grid right now. Even though it does kind of not work too well with this map in particular, it does pop specifically on the green at least. But maybe for the purposes of your game, you don't want to see any grid at all. Maybe you want the grid there just so that you can measure such things, but at the same time, you don't want to see the grid at all. In which case, you can go ahead and make the opacity a whopping 0. In which case, we don't see the grid, but of course we can go ahead and measure all of this out. Another possibility is maybe you don't want a grid at all. Maybe you're running a type of game where you are using specific measurements, and maybe you don't want to be static in regards of always having to move exactly 5 feet squares. You can just as simply go ahead and disable this grid. And once you do that, there is no grid, and thus it is no longer static. We do in fact have more options here. We have Fog of War and we have Dynamic Lighting, but I will be getting into those at a future time because those are more advanced things. We want to get to more of the fun stuff like creating characters. So we have created our map and we know how to measure things out, but now we need things to measure with. So how do we do that? Well, we have to create characters. And how do you create characters? Well, you simply go ahead and look at these tabs here, and we're going to go ahead and click on the journal tab, the one that looks like a newspaper. Currently, it looks very blank and very boring, but pretty soon here, we're going to flesh this thing out immensely. What we're going to go ahead and do here is click add, and we can go ahead and make a new character. Just like that, clicking it gives us a character sheet, and we are given Akima Lane. Sure, let's go ahead and run with it. I want to go ahead and give this character a token so that way we can manipulate it around and make it look just a little bit more fancy. So let's go ahead and give it a special token by clicking on the click to upload. There we go. I gave him a nice little dwarf token here. So we've created this character, but who is it for? You as a DM have access to every token that is in this game, and you'll be able to see everything. Your players do not, though. Your players can only see what you allow them to see. So if you want this character sheet to be seen by everyone, you can go ahead and click on In Players Journals, All Players. Once you have more players in the game, that drop-down menu will have more options and you can individualize it to everyone, meaning that you can give handouts to only certain people, and that way it creates that fun little thing of some people can see some things and other people can't. But being able to see an asset doesn't allow you to control the asset. What happens when you want to give a character sheet to a player so that they can go ahead and access it? You will go ahead and do the same thing, where you can go ahead and click Can Be Edited and Controlled By Set Individual Player. Once again, if you have more players in your game that you've invited, this drop-down menu will be larger and you can go ahead and select individual people. Now that we've given access for people to see this character sheet and access for one person to actually access this character sheet, let's go ahead and save the changes. Now in our journal, everyone that has access to site will be able to see this one individual character sheet. Let's go ahead and click on that and let's see what it means to actually edit these character sheets. We are given 3 tabs here we can select between: Bio and Info, Character Sheet, and Attributes and Abilities. If you have access to this character sheet, you can go ahead and click on Edit, and what that does is it drops down a little menu where you can go ahead and write out a little bio. This is great because the player can go ahead and write out some information about the character that everyone will be able to see, but you as a DM will go ahead and be able to write down individual notes for that character, and only you will see them. That is great for future planning because you can write something under someone's very nose and only you will be able to see it for future use. Fantastic. But creating bios and GM notes only takes you so far. Let's go ahead and dive into what the character sheet gives us. When you are running a game through 5th edition, you are given these 3 prompts whenever you click on a character sheet. You can use the Charactermancer, you can create an NPC, or you can edit the sheet directly. If you have players that are newer to D&D and they don't want to go through the copy-paste procedure and writing down a lot of things, then using the Charactermancer is fantastic. Mind you, though, that using this Charactermancer only gives you so much information. If you have not bought the Player's Handbook and Xanathar's Guide to Everything and any other book that gives you character options, then those character options will be locked away. This is operating off of the 5th edition SRD, which means that there is a decent amount of classes there. There's the majority from the Player's Handbook, but not all. There is, unfortunately, only one background, and there is, of course, unfortunately, a lot of spells missing. If you create an NPC, then you, as a DM, will go ahead and be able to create an NPC that you'll be able to use, or maybe even have the players be able to use, and this character sheet will be a lot more simpler than your player character sheet. And lastly, we have Edit the Sheet Directly. And this is for the people that already know what they want on their character sheet and are willing to go ahead and do the work and typing out everything. Let's go ahead and run through all of these options real quick. When you click on Use the Charactermancer, we'll be provided this huge all list of what's going on here. Welcome to the Charactermancer, the compendium awaits, and you can just go ahead and click on Next. As you can tell here, it's going to take us through all of the basics of making a 5th edition character. Race, class, abilities, background, equipment, spells, feats, bio, and lastly, it will go ahead and review to make sure it's all good. Through a series of easy drop-down tabs here, we'll be able to create whatever character that we want, provided, of course, it is within the realm of whatever you have available to you. Let's go ahead and speed run through this character, shall we? I know I want him to be a dwarf. And let's go ahead and say that he's going to be neutral. And let's go ahead and say that he's proficient with brewers. And let's go ahead and say that he is a hill dwarf. And just like that, next. For a class, let's go ahead and make him a fighter. Really easy stuff. Let's go ahead and throw some random proficiencies in there. Animal handling I like. Perception I like, sure. For fighting style, he's all about that tankiness, so defense. And let's go ahead and click on next. For the ability score method, of course, depending on how you run your games, this will be anything. It could be standard array, it could be roll for stats, it could be point buy, or it could be completely custom. I'm just going to go ahead and click on point buy. Pretty not well distributed stats, but hey, it is what it is. Let's go ahead and choose a background real quick. Once again, if you only have the SRD, only Acolyte will be available to you. But of course, you can input your own background should you desire. Let's go ahead and make this guy in particular a folk hero. He's proficient with the Forger kit. And let's go ahead and roll to see what happened in this guy's life and his personality traits. Oh, look at that. Secretly, he believes that things would be better if there was a tyrant lording over the land. Ooh, is that really a good folk hero? For starting equipment, I'm just going to go ahead and click on the class equipment and make my life super simple here. Nothing too major. And all the equipment's done. As you can tell here, the spells, if you are a spellcaster type, then here it'll give you a nice little drop down list of the spells that are available to you, and you'll be able to select them. And what's really nice is that here you can individually click every single spell and actually see what info they have. Unfortunately, because I chose a fighter, the fighters don't have too many spells at level 1. Here, once again, at feats, unfortunately only a variant human would be able to have a feat at level 1, so more often than not, no one's going to have this. But, of course, if you're running a custom game where you get feats at level 1, or if you are starting off by building a higher level character, we will be able to see that feats will be available. The bio here, all that fun jazz of what your character looks like, I'm just going to go ahead and skip that. And lastly, we can go ahead and see review. So we can see here in the review, I made a mistake. You've chosen the skill animal handling, but you already have that skill from your background. And that's really nice that we were able to see here that, oh, we don't want to double dip on certain things. So I could go ahead and go back and change something in regards of my character. I'm not really too perturbed about this guy individual, so let's go ahead and apply the changes. And just like that, this character sheet used to be blank and empty, but now it's completely full. Look at all this. We get some really great information here. We get all these proficiencies, we get all these items, we get all the stats done, we get the names and all that. Fantastic. And the greatest part about this character sheet is that this thing is not static. You can go ahead and change things up should you desire. You're tired of being neutral, you can go ahead and just type right in that he's neutral good. If you're playing with experience, you can go ahead and accumulate experience over time. Let's go ahead and say this guy earned himself a whopping 200 XP. You love handing out inspiration, you can go ahead and click inspiration right there. You can change and add to so many things to this character sheet, and it is fantastic. And of course, we can see here all of our traits and features. So you might be thinking to yourself, Second Wind, I have this ability. Oh, but I've totally forgotten what that does. Well, you can go ahead and click on it, and you will be able to read this thing. All you do is simply click on the name, it'll pop up for us. But let's say you want to go ahead and show that to the rest of the table. Your DM asks you, oh, hey, you know, what's that ability again? Can you tell me? Instead of having to tell, you can go ahead and click specifically on this little text bubble here when it flashes red, and all of a sudden it'll be shown to everyone. That is great. You can go ahead and show off your abilities to all the people at the table. But arguably, the most impressive part about this entire character sheet is the fact that instead of having to do the mental hurdles of calculating your attacks, the attacks are done for you. So obviously I chose a really bad character here, but let's go ahead and say that with his hand crossbow, he goes ahead and attack. Normally if you're playing at the table, you've got to think to yourself, I'm going to roll a d20, and I've got to add my dexterity, and I add my proficiency if I'm proficient in it, and I got to add the damage, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. Thankfully, all you need to do is simply click a button, and it works. We can go ahead and see here that I unfortunately rolled a natural 4. And how you read that as is, it states here that equals 4, and 4 is what I rolled, +1, +2. The +1 is from my dexterity because unfortunately this guy's only got a 12 dexterity. And the 2 is from his proficiency. And we can also see here that it rolled twice. And the reason why we rolled a 2d20 is because every once in a while you're rolling with advantage or disadvantage. And how you choose to interpret that is entirely up to you. Most people go ahead and say that if you're rolling 2 dice at a time, then you use the left one. But I have another solution for you. If you don't like the idea of having to say which dice is better, or if you only want to see 1 dice at a time because it looks better, we can go ahead and adjust that. On the character sheet here, we have core, which shows us all of our information on the character itself. We have bio, which you can totally fill out yourself and you can put all the information you want and all your notes in here. We have a spells tab, which is fantastic, and I will be getting into all the spell stuff in a moment. But most important of all here, we have this cog. And this is the backdrop of your character sheet here, and this allows you to truly customize it. There is a lot of things to go over here. We could go over adding specific items, or your character is receiving a boon that gives them plus to their saving throws. You can go over creating custom classes and how their proficiencies work. You can go ahead and give yourself jack of all trades if you're a bard, or reliable talent if you're a rogue. You can raise your passive perception if you get a certain feat, etc., etc. But the things I want to add to this character sheet is the ability to whisper to the DM and to roll an individual dice, as well as I also want to add exhaustion. So simply here is, onto this character sheet, we can see here that it says right under here, roll queries, always roll with advantage. And that is what it's saying. We're always rolling 2 dice. I want to go ahead and change that to advantage toggle. And as soon as we click that, we can see here that on the character sheet as a whole, we now get advantage, normal, and disadvantage. I really like that because you can go ahead and not have to roll as many dice and it doesn't clutter things up. And most important of all, when you roll with advantage or disadvantage, it always automatically grays out the lower rolled dice result, and it always highlights, of course, the one that makes sense, meaning that if you have advantage and you roll a 19 and an 18, then the 19 is going to be highlighted. And vice versa, if you have disadvantage and you roll a 5 and an 8, then the 5 is going to be highlighted. In addition to that, I also want to make sure that if a character is doing something sneaky and doesn't want everyone knowing, they can go ahead and roll a dice without having to tell everyone at the table. With that, all we need to simply do is go ahead and click on Whisper Rolls to GM, and go ahead and click on Whisper Toggle. And that'll once again choose between public roll and to GM roll. If you choose the public roll, everyone can see it. If you choose the 2GM roll, only you and whoever rolled that dice are going to be able to see it. Another thing we can go ahead and customize here is the fact that you can go ahead and auto roll damage. There is, of course, player and DM prerogatives on if they want to roll their damage immediately, because unfortunately, if you go ahead and attack here, it states here, of course, we shot, and let's go ahead and say for the instances of this case, we hit. If you wanted to go ahead and show off the damage of that, you have to go ahead and click on this little hand here. And that is the only way you can do it. There is nowhere on this character sheet where you can go ahead and click a button and it automatically does the damage. This only rolls the attack. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is break all that and just have everything rolled at once. So we're going to go ahead and click on auto damage roll and make it auto damage roll and crit. So now that we've selected that, we can go ahead and click on back, and we can go ahead and click on our light crossbow now. And we can see here we rolled a single dice this time and it automatically rolled the damage. Really great stuff. I also run a game where I regularly exhaust my players because they get knocked down a lot and they go up against the elements, and I want exhaustion to be on the character sheet. As you can tell here, exhaustion isn't natively anywhere. That's just something you gotta track yourself. But let's go ahead and add it to the character sheet. All you need to do is simply go down to show exhaustion tracking and click it on. And with that, boom, it appears right there. And what's really nice about this is, as we can see here, you give a player a level of exhaustion, and once it's confirmed, it tells you what it does. So let's go ahead and bump it all the way to 5. And it tells you right there what it does. That is fantastic. And of course, if you click on 6, it tells you death. Funny. So I created this character absolutely terribly, like I'm sure many people would create a terrible character. And let's go ahead and say this dwarf fighter decides he wants to finally pick up a sword for the first time in his life. How do I go ahead and give him a sword? Well, you have several options here. You could simply go ahead and click in here and add everything you want to a weapon. You could go ahead and input the name. You can go ahead and choose what attribute it is using. You can go ahead and click all the proficiencies and the magical bonuses and the damage and all that. And that's perfectly fine, especially if you are homebrewing a lot of individual weapons, or if your character has certain abilities that let them manipulate attacks. But what's really nice here, though, is you can go ahead and import weapons to the character sheet, and that will automatically do everything for us. So how do we import this weapon to our character sheet? All we need to simply do here is go over to the compendium, which is this eye with a circle around it. And this gives us the D&D 5th edition compendium. And we can go ahead and look at all the things that are listed in the compendium here. And this compendium will be fleshed out the more books you have currently owned. But the SRD comes with all of the weapons anyway, so you'll be fine. We could go through an exhaustive list by just clicking on the items and scrolling all the way down, or more importantly, we could go ahead and search for an individual weapon we want. Let's go ahead and say that our fighter wants a longsword. I will go ahead and type in longsword. So we see here, I typed in longsword and we get these options. Proficiencies longsword, and then items longsword, and then of course all the magical items, +1, +2, +3, vicious, and vorpal. I want to go ahead and drag the item longsword into the character sheet. I know something that happens all the time, a lot of people always make the mistake of, is they grab the very first thing that they see. And what happens is if you grab this longsword here and then drop it in, then it'll go ahead and say you're proficient with the longsword, but it won't do anything because you're just simply dragging in the proficiency. I, of course, want to add the item longsword to my character sheet, so let's go ahead and do that. We simply grab and hold the longsword item, drop it in, and it, one, gives us the item on our character sheet. We can see here that it weighs 3 pounds. But what's really nice is it gave us not one, but 2 options on how to use it. It gave us the longsword one-handed, and it gave us the longsword two-handed. And it already comes pre-baked in. As we can tell here just by clicking on this cog, it already does all that for us. It takes into the attribute strength. It does a 1d10 plus strength. It is just so simple and easy to use. It's fantastic. So now that our dwarf has adopted the longsword, he now shuns the blowgun and the hand crossbow. But how do we get rid of it? All you need to simply do is, much like every single place on this character sheet, you'll see a plus and a lock underneath all of the options. All we need to do is simply click on the lock, and we'll be able to shuffle things around. We can go ahead and move our longsword to the very top here. But that's not enough. I want to get rid of the blowgun and the hand crossbow. All you need to do is simply click on the little trash bin next to it. And just like that, they are gone. See, now that looks a lot better. We can see here our dwarf really loves this longsword. But this attack and spellcasting area doesn't have to only be used for attack and spellcasting. A perfect example is we as a fighter have Second Wind. And what Second Wind does is it allows you as a bonus action to heal 1d10 plus your fighter level in HP. Unfortunately, we're not given any option to go ahead and click on anywhere and have us roll a d10 plus our fighter level to gain the HP. So how do we amend this? Let's go ahead and create our own macro in this little area, and we can make that ourselves. All we do here is go ahead and click on the plus sign, and let's go ahead and make ourselves a Second Wind. I don't want this to be an attack because I'm not rolling to hit anybody. I'm just going to be rolling a simple d10. So all we need to do is check mark that little thing there, and instead it's going to just only roll a dice. And I'm going to make sure that the air quote damage is going to be 1d10. It's going to not be plus my strength because that's not how that works. And because we're fighter level 1, I'll go ahead and add a +1. The type, I'm going to go ahead and write down as healing. So we make extra sure that we don't worry about thinking that this is going to hurt us. And if you really want to make sure that this is telegraphed to everyone when you roll this, you can go ahead and write down in the description, this is a bonus action. Now that we have all this, all we need to do is simply click on the cog and that saves it. And now we have this Second Wind ability. And all we need to do is simply go ahead and roll it when it's our turn. And look at that. I just rolled a natural 6 +1, giving us 7 HP back. Excellent. So we have this awesome character sheet, but how do we actually apply it? Well, first off, we have to make sure that it is actually linked to the token that we want to use, the token that we want to have moving around battle maps and beautiful areas and all that various things. So let's go ahead and make sure we can set that up. What you want to do to put a character on the map is you simply click on their name and drag it onto the page, and just like that, they're spawned. But the thing is they aren't natively linked to the character sheet. Unfortunately, you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork in order to get the character sheet and the token combined. So let's go ahead and do that, shall we? We simply click on the token and let's click on the cog here, and we are given this token page. Let's go ahead and make sure that everyone remembers our name, so we go ahead and click on Show Template. And we also want to do something fun here. We want to show off our HP, and we also want to show off our AC. So how do we do that? Well, you can go ahead and click on one of the bars here. Let's go ahead and assign our HP to be the green, and you click on None. And it's going to give us the biggest list ever in the whole wide world here, just a billion things. You are just going to want to go ahead and find HP. You can just go ahead and drag all the way down. However, it is much simpler to just go ahead and type HP. Easy peasy, and it shows, of course, that we have 13 out of 13 HP because, of course, our character has that amount. And then, of course, the next thing we want to do is make our AC on our character visible, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll make the AC blue on this guy. Fortunately, AC is the very first pick, so you don't have to go ahead and type. And just like that, our AC is 17 because we are wearing certain armors, and of course we have the defensive style. And what do you want to do with the third bar? Well, you could make that anything. You could go ahead and make that however many charges of an ability you have left. You could go ahead and say that's how many hit dice you have left. That's entirely up to you. I'm going to go ahead and just leave that blank for now, though. And now onto the advanced settings here. We want to show off our name to everyone else. Because if you have the name selected, but the permission isn't available to see, then only whoever controls that token is going to be able to see their name. So let's go ahead and make sure that everyone recognizes our name, and let's go ahead and have everyone recognize how much HP we have and how much AC we have. Of course, once again, the text overlay is only going to be visible to whoever you show it to. So we can see here, this is what someone will be able to see if they are just simply looking at our token. They can see that the character's name, and they can see the character's HP. But let's go ahead and say that we don't like the area of where the bar is. As we can see here, the bar is of course over the character. Maybe we want the bar to be actually tied with the token underneath. So let's go ahead and do bottom overlapping. Once we save the changes, then bam, it is right there with the token. That is a really good way to compact certain things and make sure that this thing isn't too ugly and standoutish. We could also have the bar style be compact. And of course, what that's going to do is it's not going to show us individual numbers. It's going to give us vague ideas. And that can be really fun if you are showing off certain areas of, you can look at your friend and say, oh, you know, they're a little bit damaged. Oh no, but you don't want to use the exact numbers because that's a little bit metagaming. And in addition to that, we also have dynamic lighting. This is for people that have higher subscriptions to Roll20, meaning that they're actually paying for it. So I'm not going to be going into it in this video, but needless to say, you can emit it so that certain characters can see certain distances, and you can also have it where certain tokens are emitting a light, which allows your players to see. Lastly here, for the token, we can go ahead and give it an aura. Let's go ahead and say that our dwarf fighter here has an ability which reaches out within 5 feet. How do we go ahead and telegraph that to everyone? Let's go ahead and just simply have this aura reach out to 5 feet, and without clicking anything, it's going to automatically default to being a circle. We can see this circle emit all around, and that shows off that they have this certain aura within 5 feet. However, mind you, that only you will be able to see that aura until once again you decided to allow everyone to see the aura. If you don't want your aura to be a circle, you can go ahead and make it a square, and all you need to do is simply click on it, and bing, just like that, it's done. This is of course super useful for certain spells. This is of course useful for certain key abilities, and it lets you actually visualize how far you can actually see without having to constantly bust out the ruler all the time and say, oh, I can reach out to 15 feet. What do I do? So we put in all this hard work and effort into making this token customized by allowing us to see what armor class it has, by being able to see what health it has currently, what its name is. But unfortunately, that does not save forever. As we can tell here, I'll drag another person on here from that same token, and there's nothing there. Why is that? It's because we haven't saved this individual token to the character sheet. I'll go ahead and delete this one here. Let's go ahead and make sure that this token is forever saved to this character sheet. First things first, we simply click on the token that we want to save. Secondly, we click on the character sheet. Third, we go to edit. And lastly, we go ahead and use the default token. You want to click use the selected token, and that will mean that forever and all time now, whenever you go ahead and drag this token out from the character sheet, it will have everything that we have saved to it. So now that we've gone and saved it, let's go ahead and drag it out to see if it works. And just like that, perfect. Now whenever we drag a new character out from the same area, we will have exactly what we have saved on there. Excellent. So now we have our character going up against a monster, let's say. How would you go ahead and handle combat? Well, on your turn, you would simply go ahead and say, I move here, and I will go ahead and declare this. Unfortunately, you're probably going to have the character sheet up a lot of the time, and as you can tell here, the character sheet takes up a decent amount of space here. There are several ways we can go ahead and adjust that. First off, if you go ahead and just double click at the very top here at the header, it will go ahead and shrink down for us. So we can go ahead and move our token quickly, and then we can go ahead and double click back on the little bar again, and we can go ahead and pull up our character sheet relatively easily. Another thing we can do here is go ahead and adjust the UI to our desires. If you think that this is a little bit too big, one thing you can do is go ahead and hover over the journal here, hold Control and zoom out, and of course it'll zoom out the page. Of course, having the UI zoomed out a little bit might be a little bit too hard for some people. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens when you zoom in. We can go ahead and see that it might be able to easier see if you zoom in just a little bit better. But even with any of these adjustments, being able to double click or being able to zoom out, maybe this still isn't enough. Maybe this still takes too much time for you to go ahead and pop open this thing and going ahead and clicking on your longsword attack. Ooh, natural 20. What do you do if that takes too much time? Well, fortunately for you, we have a way where we can go ahead and not have to open up our character sheet on our turns in order to actually do things. So as we see here, if we go ahead and click on our token, the only thing that really pops up is everything that we are able to edit on our character. One thing that's really nice is if you go ahead and let's say the troll takes this mighty swing at us and we take 7 points of damage, instead of going into the character sheet and subtracting each individual point here, we could go ahead and actually edit that on the token itself. All you need to do is simply go to wherever your health is in this instance, and we have a 13. Let's go ahead and do -7, and we click enter, and fortunately it does it right there. 13 minus 7 equals 6, works for me. Fortunately, our cleric friend is close by and hits us with a cure wounds, and we heal for 6. So we go ahead and hit +6. And just like that, 6 plus 6 equals 12. Once again, math works out perfectly fine. So we don't have to worry about opening up our character sheet whenever we take damage. But it looks like we have to open up our character sheet to attack and do anything fancy and fun, right? Actually, no. Thanks to a very simple process here, we can go ahead and make it so that when we click our token, we have a bevy of options available to us, and it allows us to do a lot of fun things. Let's go ahead and dive into that. So on the character sheet, I've gone into the bio and info, I've gone onto the character sheet itself, but what about this attributes and abilities thing? This looks like a whole bunch of gibberish to me, honestly. What is at, wit type, all that stuff, I don't understand that. But what I do understand is that we are able to add our own abilities. These abilities are going to allow us to use whatever token is saved to our character sheet and have it as a pop-up for future use. So my dwarf loves attacking with his longsword, and I don't want to have to open up my character sheet every time he attacks with his longsword. What do? Let's go ahead and add an attack roll for this guy. So all we need to do is simply go ahead and click on add ability, and it gives us new ability 0. First things first, we're going to want to do here is go ahead and click on the little pencil here to edit. And then we're going to go ahead and name it Longsword One-Handed, let's say. But now what do? We see here that there's just an empty box. What do we type here? We don't type in Longsword Attack. We don't do any of that stuff. We have to put in a very specific code. Fortunately for you, I'm going to go ahead and link down below all of the things that we're going to be using here for all of these codes. They are totally nonsensical to me anyway. I'm not a coder myself. But, these things are simple, and all you need to do is copy and paste, and they work. For example, like this. We currently have percentage selected repeating attack 0 attack. What does that mean? That means it's going to go ahead and pick something from our attack box. So once we have pasted it in, all we need to simply do is go ahead and checkbox it and make sure it works. And most important of all, we need to make it so that it shows as token action. This is very important because if you do not have that, it's not going to show up. So now that we have this selected, what happens? Well, let's take a look at the magic. Boom, just like that, when we click on our token, now at the very top, we get longsword one-handed. That is so cool. And to make double sure that it works, all we need to do is simply go ahead and click it. And just like that, hey, it works. It's just like magic. So we put in this macro here and it selected the first thing. Why is that? Well, basically, in layman's terms, it's taking from this box, and how it's listed as is the very first thing in the list is labeled as marker 0. The next marker will be marker 1, then the third one will be 2, and so on and so forth. It might be a little confusing, but just remember that 0 is 1, and 1 is 2, and etc, etc. So let's go ahead and just pump out a whole bunch of these actions real quick. So now I've gone in and added all of the other attacks, such as the longsword, two-handed, the crossbow, and the second wind. As you can tell here, just to make sure, the longsword two-handed, I've gone ahead and replaced the 0 with a 1. And for light crossbow, I've replaced the 0 with a 2, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and make sure these things work, shall we? And look at that, it works. The crossbow works. The second wind works. However, mind you, something important to note here is, even though the longsword one-handed and then the two-handed and the second wind, these things seem out of order. And why is that? Well, that is because these things are all in alphabetical order. If you want to ensure that everything is in currently the order that it's in on your attack sheet, you're going to have to put in symbols or letters to make sure that it is in the order that you desire. For example, like this. This is very ugly though. I would recommend doing something different. Maybe have a little letter there, or, just go ahead and go through different sets of symbols. Entirely up to you. But our characters do more than just simply attack with weapons or shoot off little cantrips, and they do more than just simply second wind. There's a lot of things that you might want to do as a character that aren't attacks, such as you might want to make tool checks, skill checks, saving throws, and also maybe just use and most important of all, you may want to throw initiative. So how do we do all that? Once again, every single one of these macros are going to be in the description below that you can go ahead and copy and paste into your own game. Let's go ahead and flash forward to see what the completed list looks like. Alrighty, some other ones I've provided are tool use, saves, skill checks, and initiative. These are all going to be very important for the games that you do, because I promise you with a combination of all of these, almost all of your troubles are going to melt away. For the most part, a lot of martial classes aren't going to have to bust out their character sheet on their turn. They can go ahead and simply click on their character, and they'll be given a huge list of things that they can do, such as, alright, the fighter is hit by a fireball. He has to roll a dexterity saving throw. All you need to do is simply go ahead and click on saves, and it'll prompt you. Alright, fireball, I have to roll a dex save. Boom. Oh, hey, look at that. I actually saved with only a +1. Not bad. Alright, as you're running around, you see a pit. Do you try and jump over it? Alright, go ahead and roll me an athletics check. And then you go ahead and click on the skill checks here and go ahead and find athletics. And boom. Not bad, not bad. Now, mind you, though, tools use in particular, this one's only going to actually work if you actually have a tool in your kit. Meaning that if you don't have anything here, it's not going to work at all. But of course, if they don't have any tool, then they're probably not going to be using it. But once again, you can just go ahead and say that as you're steering the land vehicle, you need to pull it hard. So go ahead and roll me a strength alongside your land vehicle. And bam. Simple stuff. But I will say the most important and most memorable and awesome of all is initiative. So initiative. Initiative is one of those things where you're running in person, you got to sit there and jot a whole bunch of notes, and you got to draw diagrams, and you got to keep track of all this. Maybe you put scorecards on. So many people do it so many different ways. But man, does Roll20 make your life infinitely easier, because instead of having to worry about 10 different characters, having to say, all right, what's your initiative? What's your initiative? What's your initiative? All of a sudden, all of that just simply melts away. And why does it do that? Well, it's because once you give this initiative macro to everyone, all you need to do is simply click on whatever token has the initiative. You go there, you click initiative, and bam, their initiative is just laid out for you. But that isn't enough. What makes initiative super duper good is the fact that you have an initiative tracker. That is in fact one of the things here on the toolbar here. You go ahead and click on that little clock there, and that is the initiative tracker. So we can see here the turn order. It saved what we just rolled there, and as we're going to get to in a moment, it's going to show you a lot more. So now we've added all these actors to the combat, and normally you'd just be sitting there rolling dice and having to scratch in or, put up a card or whatever and asking everyone. But thankfully, we can just sit here and just roll initiative really quickly. Mind you, if you do not use this macro, then what you are going to have to do is you're going to have to select whatever token you are running on, and also clicking on this little initiative button right here. Works the same, just a little bit slower. So now we have all the initiative rolled up, and we can see here that it's completely out of order. What do we do? Well, fortunately, instead of having to sit there and moving them around left, right, up, and down, we can just simply click on this little cog and numerically go descending. And that way we can tell, oh, the black bear got 19, the troll got 16, etc., etc. Having this initiative tracker is a lifesaver. It makes life so simple. You can see it, your players can see it, and it makes life so good and easy, and is fantastic. Mind you, of course, what I just said, that your players can see it. If you are running a game where you don't want your players to see it, then unfortunately there is no option to make it hidden. So if you are running one of those games, then you are going to have to continue doing it on the side. But for most groups, of course, they're going to be able to see it. And of course, they can also minimize it to get it out of the way if they don't really care about it, like that. Simple as that. To move the turns around, instead of having to once again drag the tokens all willy-nilly, all you need to do is simply click on the next arrow. And we can see here that the troll's next, and we can see here that the goblin's up, and etc., etc. That was just a quick look into the character sheet here and how we can customize it and how we can work Roll20. I will be, of course, going into future details on how you can run modules and how you can manipulate the character sheet some more and other things you can do to make Roll20 as awesome as it is. In the next video, we will be covering how to do spells, how to make your own monsters, and how to give your players handouts and access to certain things. But that is going to do it for me, because this was a bit of a doozy. But, this series is going to be a bit of a doozy. It is a masterclass after all. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you stick around, and hopefully you learn some things. If you're new to Roll20, I'm sure that you're going to learn a lot. And I hope that if you aren't even new to Roll20, you've been using it for a while, I hope there's some things you could have missed, because I've been using Roll20 for years, and there's still some things I learn every once in a while. There's just a lot you can do with it. And, once again, it's awesome purely because it can be free. Of course, you can pay a little bit into it and get a little bit more access to certain things, but you don't need those things. It's entirely up to you. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good day, and goodbye.